The ebb and flow of time was a concept foreign to Marvin Carter, the Federation ace once called the Ghost of Mars. For nearly 7 years, a boy forged by the fires of war shambled through life as a husk of his former self. To Marvin, the passage of time meant nothing. It merely inched him closer to a meaningless death. Though he was alive, the boy's spirit had long since been broken. Come 0086 of the Universal Century, however, something within the now 20-year-old man had begun to change. At first, it was subtle things, slight gestures only those closest to him could pick up on. But, over time, this change grew into something more profound. Marvin, last of the Martians, began to develop beliefs which were entirely his own. He found a strength he thought lost, a strength he'd need for the trials to come. Before he knew it, Marvin had found himself firing the first shot of a war that would one day be known as the Grips Conflict. The Titans, a branch of the Federation military the young man still technically served, had set into motion a plot that would see the deaths of countless innocent people. Marvin, alongside the crew of a disgraced warship, the Pegasus Class Albion, averted disaster but were branded traitors in the process. On the run, the band of unlikely rebels joined forces with the Anti-Earth Union Group, an emerging organization which sought to see the Titans answer for their crimes. Rapidly, months began to tick by as battles were fought, bonds forged. However, during that time, Marvin encountered something most peculiar: other Newtypes. Seeing echoes of the past before him, the young man vowed to himself that, no matter what it took, he'd see to it that those like him, regardless of the form they came, would have a life worth living. Whatever the cost, Marvin wouldn't let those he cared about end up like him. Yet, in spite of his newfound conviction, the young man still had a soul weighed down by gravity. It was only a matter of time until something gave, be it Marvin or the fears which held him back. Covering an Aug retreat, the Albion had found itself in bitter conflict with a Titans Battlegroup. The situation unto itself was a precarious one. However, it was made infinitely worse by the force's commanding officer. Much to the captain of the Albion's horror, he faced Commodore Inoue, his sister. Taken to the field in Amarasai, Inoue had closed the distance on her brother's ship and placed the barrel of her mobile suit's rifle against its bridge. Seeing this, Marvin reacted immediately and engaged the woman in a duel. In a modified Gelgoog, upgraded with the Gerbera Tetra's salvage remains, the Martian started a fight which he wasn't prepared for. Though the Commodore was a skilled pilot, none of her attacks seemed to connect. The former ace would always dodge in the nick of time, as if he could sense her hostile intent. In spite of that, however, Marvin himself had the same issue as his opponent. He couldn't hit her. He saw openings time and again, yet he still couldn't hit her. The young man's opponent wasn't an ordinary enemy, but his friend's sister. If he killed her, he'd hurt the captain. He'd feel a sorrow the Martian had become all too familiar with. Marvin didn't want that to happen, but if things continued as they were, someone was bound to die. Then, as the tip of his beam saber grazed the Marasai's cockpit, the young man had an old memory he buried return. He was 13 again, flying through the depths of a Bawaku as a mobile armor piloted by a woman he cared for gave chase. Feelings of panic and fear, of despair, flooded the boy's mind. The battle before him was one he didn't want, yet one he couldn't escape all the same. Distracted, Marvin left a hole in his defenses, which the Commodore exploited. With a firm kick, the woman pushed off her opponent and sped toward the Albion. Desperately, the Martian gave chase but couldn't catch her. With a cosmic mist rolling onto the battlefield and covering it in a deep shade of blue, the young man did the only thing he could think of: raise his rifle. It would only take a single shot, a pull of the trigger, to save the ship. Yet Marvin couldn't bring himself to take the shot. He was afraid. Doubt was clouding his judgment. All he could do was think back to that fateful moment, that one mistake he made so many years ago. Stricken by indecision, Marvin did nothing and watched helplessly as a beam ripped through the Albion's bridge, killing everyone. Seeing such a sight, he couldn't bring himself to do anything except scream in vain. Then, with a blue fog slowly enveloping the cockpit's interior, the young man ripped off his helmet and sobbed. Once more, his spirit was broken.
"Is this how you want things to end?"
questioned the distant voice of a woman. Marvin lifted his tear-soaked eyes out of his hands and looked up. He was no longer in the mobile suit's cockpit, but a silent void, bathed in blue.
"Is this how you want things to end?"
the voice asked once more.
Of course not!
The Martian cried out.
"Then why have you paused? You've been doing so well."
The woman's voice didn't betray any sense of judgment. In fact, it was warm, comforting, like the golden light of a candle flickering in a parlor.
Marvin stammered. I don't know what to do. I just can't take it anymore.
Beneath the young man's feet, the void cracked, the muted sounds of battle slowly returning.
Every choice I've made, they've led to nothing but misery.
The Martian choked out. Once more, a Battlegroup flashed through Marvin's mind. His beam saber was firmly lodged into the depths of a mobile armor, a woman he loved at the other end of it. Dead.
The colony? The ghosts? Riley? They're all dead because of me!
The young man screamed. His voice echoing across the abyss, Marvin fell silent and began to stare at the floor.
"That isn't true,"
the voice uttered flatly.
"That isn't true at all."
With a bright gleam of light, the void was gone, and before he knew it, the Martian was in the cockpit of his mobile suit, floating beside the Albion. Much to his surprise, the battle had momentarily calmed down. A thick blue fog had obscured everyone's vision and brought the fight to a sudden halt. Staring at the ship's intact bridge, Marvin could only utter a single word. How? The young man couldn't believe his eyes. The Albion was fine, despite what he witnessed.
"The future. That's what you saw."
Unlike before, the woman's voice seemed closer, as if she was standing beside the battered Martian. Then, feeling the fingers of another wrap around his hand, Marvin looked to his right and saw a sight both familiar, yet foreign. The ghostly visage of a girl he never met before was looking back at him, her golden hair dangling softly.
"The future, where you remained trapped in the past."
Guiding his hand, the girl directed the camera of Marvin's mobile suit toward the Gundam at his back. Without saying a word, the intent and message behind her action was clear. The pilot of the reactivated GP-03, Zach Ingram, was a dear friend who'd been brought back from the brink. His anger and hate, the darker urges he kept at bay, were fading. He was a better man than he had once been, and was beginning to slowly embrace his nature as a new type. Adjusting the angle slightly, the head of the Gelgoog stared down a different machine, a stolen Pale Rider piloted by Carme Selva, who, alongside her sister Hilde Fram, had once been an enemy, a weapon the crew of the Albion fought desperately to save. Though the gamble had been great, it paid off. The pair of cyber Newtypes were free to live their lives as they saw fit. Floating through space, the pilot of the prototype Rick DS, Eldon Zito, placed the arm of his machine on that of Marvin's. At the start of the 1-year war, he lost both his wife and daughter. If he didn't find a reason to keep on living, to keep fighting, he'd have died long ago.
"You helped them and so many others,"
the girl declared as the Gelgoog turned to face the Albion.
"But I didn't do it alone,"
admitted the young man. With the bizarre fog subsiding, the Martian watched as the pilots he called friends drifted up towards the warship's bridge. The foundation Marvin relied upon, Matthias Wirtz, and the former rival Victor Irene in their GM cannons, the aloof Denton Fargo, and ever-rambunctious Frank Williams in machines unique solely to them. The complicated Holly Fallbrook with her GM Sniper 2, a reminder of her time with the Titans, and the good-natured Reginald Inoue, captain of the Albion, had all managed to make the impossible possible on more than one occasion.
Exactly.
The girl proclaimed.
That's my point. Exactly.
Beams from the distant Salamis opened fire as the last of the blue mist subsided. Fearing nothing, Zeta and Zack sped toward the approaching swarm of Titans' mobile suits.
Those that follow, they don't hate you.
As she spoke, the girl began to fade. It was a sensation Marvin had become accustomed to. The ghosts which haunted him never stayed for long. Returning fire, the Albion illuminated the void of space with its megaparticle cannons and tore into the enemy vessels. Though it did nothing to deter the advancing horde, Holly, Denton, Carme, and Frank took to the flanks in a bid to slow them down.
You held no malice for those you killed.
The voice echoed throughout the cockpit.
Stop blaming yourself. Let them help.
Suddenly, the swarm of enemy mobile suits scattered as Wirtz and Victor tore into them with their cannons. The distance between the Titans and the Albion was almost closed.
You can't change what's already passed. Go back to how things used to be.
Unlike before, the girl's plea wasn't calm, but emotional.
So let your soul be free. Accept what you've done.
His hands shaking, Marvin gripped the Gelgoog's controls, a machine given to him as a token of faith, and pushed them forward. Without a single thought, a shred of fear, he raced towards the Titans. Though the young man's mind was still wrapped in a fragile haze, only a thin veil of doubt remained, the last obstacle his trapped soul had to overcome. Finally departing, the voice made one last request.
Embrace those that wish to help. Embrace what you can become.
Letting his suit cut loose, Marvin closed the distance on Zack and Zito. Beam saber in hand, he plunged into the enemy formation alongside his friends, his family, and waltzed past the shots of his foes like a crackling bolt of lightning. Erratic, rapid, yet precise, deliberate. Something was different, and even though the pressures of battle kept their minds occupied, the others knew it. One by one, the Newtypes Marvin had killed, Awoken or otherwise, emerged before his eyes and nudged him in the right direction. With their aid, the young man avoided blows that would have otherwise seen him dead. With each of their assists, he felt lighter, freer. Then, staring down the face of a former commanding officer, the Martian nodded. Feeling an ancient weight lift off his shoulders, the old ghost guided the pilot's hand and had him strike down an approaching Marasai with a single swing of his saber. However, as fast as he came, the old commander left. Surrounded on all sides, the young man began to experience a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Looking to his left, he gazed in silence upon a woman whose name he could never forget. Without a word, she reached across the console and forced Marvin's Gelgoog to rapidly descend. Narrowly avoiding the paired strike of two other Marasais, the woman looked down at the boy she once connected with, only to utter two simple words. "I'm sorry." The Martian whispered as she faded away. "There's no need for that." Across the battlefield, back towards the Albion, Marvin could feel the re-emerging pressure of an old enemy. One, Murasame. In a big row, the aggressive cyber Newtype was looking for revenge. He wanted to kill the pair of pilots that had shot him down a few months previous. Refusing to put Zack in danger, the Martian tightened his grip around the mobile suit's controls, kicked off an opposing Marasai, destroying it, and sped towards his target as fast as he possibly could.
"Warren!"
Marvin belted at the top of his lungs.
"Your fight's with me!"
The cyber Newtype laughed.
All right then. Guess you'll die first.
"Wirtz!
The Martian cracked over the comms.
Let's take this bastard down!"
Before hearing a response, One launched a volley of missiles that the Albion's beam AA intercepted. What little got through posed no threat, however, as Marvin was able to dodge it before closing the distance between him and the big row.
Hey, look at that.
The cyber Newtype cackled.
Instead of running away, the dead man's coming right for me.
In a passionate fury, the Martian drop-kicked the approaching mobile armor while firing several rounds of his rifle into the machine's hull. Seeing those bolts of energy rip holes into his opponent, Marvin came to a sudden realization which made him freeze. Facing a skilled combatant, this proved to be a poor lapse of judgment.
A bad idea. Really?
Taunted one. With its claw, the big row grabbed the Gelgoog by its waist and took the pilot for a less than pleasurable ride. Flying through a debris field of derelict ships and mobile suits, Marvin fought desperately to stay conscious as stories told to him by Hilde and Carme, stories about the labs which created cyber Newtypes, raced through his mind. What was done to them, what they endured, what they have to live with for the rest of their lives was something he could not let stand. The Martian's choices led him into becoming who he was, but the kids at those labs had no such luxury. To the depths of his core, Marvin wanted to set things right, give them a life worth living. Save one. Because of these thoughts, the young man was once again frozen with indecision. He didn't want to kill somebody he wished to protect.
Who are you, and what have you done with my brother?
The chipper voice of a boy earnestly asked. Unable to move his head, Marvin pushed back against the cockpit seat to widen his vision. However, this was a pointless endeavor. He already knew who he was speaking to.
Riley?
The young man forced himself to say. Crashing through the wreckage of a Salamis, the Gelgoog began to crack and tear as it sustained damage.
Do you remember what you were like the first time you fought in a mobile suit?
Riley asked, leaving time for a response, but getting nothing.
Well, since you're preoccupied, I'll tell you. You were a total badass, a freaking superhero.
The Gelgoog's main rifle exploded upon coming into contact with a hulked GM Quell.
Now, you're a mopey wimp,
the boy continued.
I died cheering on my big brother. I died proud, so what's the big deal? But
The young man tried to speak, but the G's he was experiencing made that nearly impossible.
You what?
Barked Riley.
Tripped and crashed into me? We both know that isn't what happened. The feds shot your leg out.
Being scolded by a ghost, Marvin activated the Gelgoog's beam saber and plunged it into the Salamis's hull, cutting an opening as the big row continued its charge.
There you go!
The boy whimsically cheered.
Keep fighting him and not yourself.
Seeing the debris field's emerging opening, Wirtz took position with his GM cannon and waited for his moment. He saw the Martian he knew all too well throw himself into the fire. Just like the one-year war, it was on him to pull his ass out.
But one's not to blame,
stated Marvin.
Oh, don't worry. Your friends will be joining you soon enough.
The cyber Newtype goaded over the comms. With the big row's other claw, one crushed the Gelgoog's hand, destroying its beam saber and leaving the suit virtually defenseless. Marvin only had one weapon left, a last resort he didn't want to use.
Hey, Marv,
Riley poked.
Before he went off to war, you remember what Dad told the three of us?
The young man remained silent, his thoughts drifting toward Elise, a big sister he missed desperately.
When a man strays from the right path, a kind man needs the courage to raise his fist and correct him.
The boy's tone reminded Marvin of their father. With a jolt, the Martian banged his head off the mobile suit's control console, cracking open his unprotected face. Over the comms, the cyber Newtype continued his insufferable yammering.
You know what that means, right? If you want to save this guy, you need to move on.
Gritting his teeth, Marvin nodded and pushed back against the forces of gravity which kept him confined. He was going to beat one, correct him. Riley placed his spectral hand on top of his brother's and helped him reach for the necessary switch he desperately needed. Unaware, the young man opened himself up and began projecting his unique, almost sickly, psychic pressure.
That's it.
The boy shouted.
Just a bit further. You're almost there.
Carme was the first to notice something was amiss. The cyber Newtype had felt this peculiar, suffocating feeling before and reached out. As a total stranger, Marvin had risked everything to save her. Of course, she'd help him in his time of need. Barely out of reach, the Martian grabbed his chair's restraints and moved to undo them. Eventually, Zack too realized something was off, as if the atmosphere of battle had changed. He may not have known what was going on, but understood full well his friend was riled up. Closing his eyes, the emerging Newtype lent him his aid without question.
Show this guy what you're made of and kick his ass!
As Riley shouted, the latches keeping Marvin in place snapped, forcing him to rapidly ascend and hit the cockpit's roof. Clutching his head, Reginald Inoue, a dormant Newtype, dropped to his knees in pain. The rampant psychic phenomena was simply too much. He couldn't handle it. But then, to himself, the captain began to utter a single command. A command which set him down his current path.
Let go of your doubt, your guilt, and let it awaken!
The boy howled. Seeing the mobile armor emerge out of the debris field, Wirtz leveled his cannons at the mechanized monster and fired. Scoring a direct hit, the level-headed pilot severed the Big Row's claw and freed his friend of many years. Brought to a screeching halt, Marvin punched the required switch with a clenched fist and grabbed a hold of his suit's controls. Her Sniper 2 only a few feet away, Holly Fallbrook felt every emotion which emanated from the young man's position. However, some of them seemed foreign, as if they weren't simply his own. Unfortunately for the former Titan, however, she couldn't quite grasp what was happening, let alone the potential that laid within her.
Awaken!
Riley screamed.
Awaken! A new type's lost power!
Reaching back, Marvin's Gelgoog grabbed the weapon, which fired the first shot of the Grip's conflict, a relic of Operation Stardust, the GP-01's anti-ship rifle, and leveled it at one's Big Row. Across the entire battlefield, those that could feel the pressure of a Newtype, be them awoken or not, felt something radiate off of the last living Martian. A primal rage, a fury, which was unlike anything they had experienced before. Blood pouring from his ears, Eldon Zito begged Marvin to calm down. He didn't want to lose his friend, his brother, like he had at the end of the 1-year war. But then he felt it. A sensation, a warmth he thought gone forever.
One Murasame!
The Martian shouted, his weapon ready to fire. Pushing the Albion's comm officer out of the way, Hild, another cyber Newtype Marvin helped save, gave her friend an order, which the captain continued to utter.
This fight is over!
Take the shot.
The ghosts of the dead grant me an awesome power! Their raging cries tell me to defeat you! Take this! Their hopes, their fears, and all of their sorrows! Solar cannon, fire!
The rifle's magenta beam erupted and sped toward the mobile armor, which it was to consume. Then, mere moments before impact, a brilliant blue light poured out of the Gelgoog's cockpit and engulfed the pillar of energy. Upon making contact with the Big Row, the machine was vaporized in its entirety, save for a single component: the escape pod. Every Newtype on that battlefield, be them living or dead, had linked their minds with Marvin to perform a miracle, make the impossible possible, save one Murasame, give him a chance at a life worth living. Leaning back in his seat, the young man looked to Riley's ghost, only to see nothing. His little brother was gone, no longer needed. Aboard the Albion, several hours after the battle, the exhausted young man caught himself staring longingly out toward the vast expanse of space. Beside a window, something was drawing his eye far beyond the point which he could see. Yet, he didn't know what. However, as he thought on those that came to his aid, a realization struck Marvin. That girl with blonde hair, the one who helped him, he saw her memories. Or, at the very least, a select few. Like one, Hild and Carme, she had suffered terribly at one of the Federation's Newtype labs, though there was still much Marvin didn't know about her. Things which didn't add up. It didn't matter. Despite everything, she helped him in ways no one else could. And for that, she had the man's gratitude. "Rita, I hope we meet again," Marvin whispered softly. In the distance, a blue light twinkled, as if to give a farewell. Knowing full well what it meant, the young man smiled to himself. For the first time in his life, the Martian finally understood the ebb and flow of time. With the weight of the past lifted, he set out toward a new day.